Let the torch of freedom burn.
This is WallBuilders Live. Thanks for joining us today at the intersection of faith and the culture. We're going to be taking a look at some of the hot topics of the day from a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective. And today is Good News Friday, which means we'll be looking at some good news from across the nation and around the world. We're here with David Barton. He's America's premier historian and our founder at WallBuilders. Tim Barton is with us, national speaker and pastor and president of WallBuilders. And my name's Rick Green. I'm a former Texas legislator and America's Constitution coach. You can find out more about us at wallbuilderslive.com, and that is a great website to visit because, first of all, you can listen to past programs that you might have missed out on. You can share the links to those programs with your friends and family, making you a force multiplier out there by educating, equipping, and inspiring your fellow citizens to do their part to preserve and pass the torch of freedom. So be sure and visit that website for that purpose, but also go to the website so that you can make a contribution. Yes, click on wallbuilderslive.com first, get there, and then click on contribution and make that one-time or monthly contribution. Listen, it takes money to do what we're doing. It takes money to be on radio stations around the country. It takes those dollars to produce a program, to get the interviews set up, to spread the good news, to train the pastors that we train when we take them to Washington, D.C., to do our legislators' conferences, our youth leadership program. I mean, you name it. All of those things take dollars to be effective and to influence the culture in that positive way. And we're excited about that. We're not complaining about that. We think it's great that you can make a financial investment in freedom. And that's what we're asking you to do. Go to wallbuilderslive.com, make that contribution, come alongside us, be a part of the solution. All right, David, Tim, let's dive into some of that good news. David Barton will be starting us off. First piece of good news is coming from, I want to guess. It's, I have no idea what's in your stack. It's going to be from Minnesota and has to do with the courts. Not even close, right?
Man, if I have to wait for you to get this right, it may be weeks before. If that's an indication of,
I thought the courts would be a good guess because you always got a piece of good news from the courts at some point in our program.
But Minnesota, I mean, the
I
courts.
don't know. It just came to mind. And even I'm going to get emails from people in Minnesota saying I said it wrong. So from Minnesota, there.
There you go.
And it's not even from Minnesota, but we've made that part of our program today. What is it from? Where is it from?
It is international of all places. So lots of countries. And by the way, I would say that President Trump, he doesn't get much credit for this, but I would say that he has done a whole lot in changing the international climate in a lot of ways. I mean, you're just not hearing anything from North Korea anymore now. You know, it was real visible for a while, and they had the spitting match back and forth, and, you know, Trump backed him down, and then they were going to talk, and then he stands back up, and Trump's not going to tell me what to do. And all that being said, North Korea has kind of gone silent on us, and you just don't hear all their clamor and bluster and noise anymore. And then you look at China, you know, and he says we're gonna do all this trade embargoes and tariffs and whatever, and people said, oh, that's going to kill the economy. And the Chinese yelled and said, well, we're doing retaliatory stuff. And yeah, but we look now, and suddenly the trade deficit has shifted in favor of America out of China, and now we got this trade agreement with China that is just not getting talked about much, but it's suddenly real favorable for the United States. And then we can kind of look at Iran and say, well, you know, he took on Iran just head on and went right at Iran, and now they're having riots internally because they don't have enough money to feed their people because they're spending it all and trying to do a nuclear program. And he's knocked that, just kind of knocked them backwards on that. And I mean, you just go through so many places where he stood up to countries and the media took him on and said, oh, he's being really mean and really whatever. And, you know, he'll do his tweets and he'll be real aggressive with those countries. But nonetheless, as the noise goes away and you look back, you say, my gosh, these countries made a whole lot of concessions and moved our direction. Well, let me take Mexico as an example, because we had all that stuff on the border, all those caravans coming across and all the stuff that was happening there. And man, how uncivilized America was and what we were doing to separate kids from parents. And, you know, Mexico was the poor victim in all of this. And he was putting pressure on Mexico and he shouldn't be doing that. And yet this little story I've got in my hands right now says that what happened in Mexico is Mexico just blocked 2,500 migrants from crossing their southern border heading to the United States.
Now, that's what they said they wouldn't do before, right?
I think that's exactly what they said they wouldn't do before. And they've now got their eyes not on this caravan, but others, and they're blocking them at the southern point of entry. into Mexico. They're saying, nope, we're not allowing you to go through our country up to the United States. And Trump put some economic pressures on Mexico and trade stuff there and agreements and other things. And suddenly now we see Mexico lining up. And, we're getting all these policies done. And the media is really silent about all the success he's had in so many ways. And part of what happened before when we had the crisis at the border was all these people claiming asylum. And, it's not necessarily asylum. Maybe it's bad economics. Maybe they just want a different place. Maybe they don't like where they are anymore. And asylum, it was like, if you claim asylum, we can't turn you down. And so Trump came up with this thing that says, well, if you claim asylum, we're not going to let you wait in the United States because most of you never show up for court dates again. We'll send you to a safe third country where nothing can happen to you. And that safe third country was Guatemala. And so what happens is these that get turned away at the border because they can't get asylum and we're not instantly granting asylum anymore, they're going into Guatemala. And so as you look at what's happening with Guatemala and the things there, it's really interesting what's happened on the traffic flow coming through there. The fact that we're not instantly granting asylum status for people who are here, but you actually have to go through a legitimate process. And, if you're coming here in poverty and expect us to support you, we're not doing that anymore. And there are just so many things that are changing in the immigration model. And here's a new one that goes with that is Trump has shut down what is called birth tourism. In other words, I'm about to give birth.
Tourism. I'm going to go on a tour of having birth. No, you're going to go on a tour to the U.S. so you can give birth, I guess.
So you can have birth. I'm a week or so away from delivery. I'm going to make a quick trip to the United States. Never been there before, but I'm going to go there and have my baby there, and then I'll be able to be a citizen. We have anchor baby. And so Trump is now shutting that down, that if immigrants are trying to suddenly arrange a trip to the United States right at the point of delivery, no, we're not doing that. And by the way, I have to point out, anchor babies is nothing new. Back when the first 3 immigration laws were done by the Founding Fathers themselves, back in 1791 and 1795 and 1798, they stopped anchor babies back then. They said citizenship goes from the parents to the child, not from the child to the parents. So if the parents come in, become citizens, and their children become citizens, but not the other way around. And so way back then, they put the foot down on anchor babies, and we've allowed it to get away from us. And so now people who have no interest and no willingness to contribute to America, but only to take, that's kind of being shut down as well. So I've got to give Trump so much credit on so many international fronts where that nobody's really talking about it. But now the fact that Mexico is putting its foot down on these caravans coming through, the fact that Guatemala is actually helping the United States and taking this safe asylum kind of stuff until the litigation's done, and the fact that Trump is now saying no more of this birth tourism, I see this as really good stuff, both for America and for other countries, because it really puts America back in a position of strength, and that if you're coming here, there's a reason to come here. You can be a contributor, and that makes it really good for your country as well as for our country.
I feel like we're doing the international version of Good News Friday. Very good news. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Tim Barton's got a piece of good news, and I don't know if it's international or going to be from Minnesota. Who knows? We'll be right back. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
Hey, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders. And as you've had the opportunity to listen to WallBuilders Live, you've probably heard the wealth of information about our nation, about our spiritual heritage, about the religious liberties, about all the things that makes America exceptional. And you might be thinking, as incredible as this information is, I wish there was a way that I could get one of the WallBuilders guys to come to my area and share with my group, whether it be a church, whether it be a Christian school or public school or some political event or activity. If you're interested in having a WallBuilder speaker come to your area, you can get on our website at www.wallbuilders.com, and there's a tab for scheduling. And if you'll click on that tab, you'll notice there's a list of information from speakers' bios to events that are already going on, and there's a section where you can request an event to bring this information about who we are, where we came from, our religious liberties and freedoms. Go to the WallBuilders website and bring a speaker to your area.
It's Good News Friday here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Next piece of good news coming from Tim Barton. Tim.
Guys, this one is coming from the NFL, and one of the things that we have seen in the NFL over the last couple of years is kind of I don't know if resurgence is the right word, growth, exposure to Christians in the NFL. I don't know what the NFL was like prior to the last couple of decades. That's beyond my recollection. Dad, Rick, y'all probably have a little more experience with previous decades, but right, certainly in the last couple of years, we have seen the NFL have a rise of outspoken Christians. And maybe part of it is social media has given a platform to more and more people to be outspoken about their faith. And there are many quarterbacks, for example, in the NFL who have been outspoken about their faith. The Russell Wilsons and Drew Brees and Carson Wentz, et cetera. You can go down the list of people who have had professions of faith and talked about how faith has made a difference in their life and shaped and impacted part of what they've done. Well, there was a tweet that came out earlier in the year that just so really cool from quarterback Kirk Cousins. Now, Kirk Cousins is part of the Vikings. And right, obviously being in Texas, we're not really Vikings fans. There was a couple seasons ago, we felt like we got robbed at a Vikings game and you know, et cetera, which I'm sure every sports fan has that moment where there's a reason there's some team they don't like. Nonetheless, as Texans, really living around the Cowboys, which is now making it hard even for us because one day the Cowboys are going to be awesome again, and we're just going to keep cheering along the way, but we kind of have a backup team as well. So when the Cowboys get beat, then we cheer for somebody else. And we just happen to be cheering for the quarterback from Lubbock, Patrick Mahomes, this year. So that was super fun. Anyway, we digress. Kirk Cousins, quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, on Twitter, put up a picture of a Bible. And here's what he said. It took me over 2 years, but just finished reading through the entire Bible for the first time. Definitely recommend it. First of all, that's really awesome that Kirk Cousins read through the Bible, and it's something we certainly recommend. As we've studied American history, we've seen over and over how the founding fathers talked about reading the Bible, how the Bible impacted them and shaped their life, and many of them made it a practice to read the Bible every single year. We know in early education that the Bible was a very common textbook for students to learn to read, and it was pretty common practice to read all the way through the Bible. So early Americans very familiar with the Bible. It's a practice that's largely been lost and forgotten today, but to have someone of NFL, right, starting quarterback status to come out and say, hey, just read through the entire Bible, recommends you do the same thing. His tweet at the time the picture was taken had more than 90,000 likes. Which is really awesome. And Kirk Cousins has spoken out about his faith on several different occasions. In fact, on his Twitter account, part of his bio, it says, quoting from Micah 6:8, "What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God." So the fact that he's putting a Bible verse on his Twitter bio is impressive. And then he's had many interviews where he's referenced faith and God, but here's one that is highlighted in this article and I actually remember this interview. He says, "My faith is important to me. It is the foundation for my life." He continued, "Ultimately, there's where I gain my peace and strength. Win or lose, God's still on the throne, and I take comfort in that." It's, guys, just really cool to see another example of an NFL athlete, of someone who has been in the spotlight, who's had fame, had notoriety. I mean, obviously, right? There's people that would say he's not good. He is good. There's a lot of athletic talk that surrounds him, but for the middle of all the drama that he lives in, for him to stand up and be outspoken about his faith, it's just so cool that we are seeing more and more stars, more and more athletes who are willing to stand up and say that, no, I believe in God. In a culture that seems so critical of Christians on so many areas and levels, it's awesome to see a starting NFL quarterback stand up and promote the Bible and be open about his faith. Really good news.
All right, hang tight, folks. We've got more good news for you today. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on WallBuilders Live.
Hi, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders, and I want to encourage all the pastors out there with the unique opportunity that we're presenting at WallBuilders. We're doing a special tour just for pastors that you can come and learn more about the spiritual heritage of our nation. Not just seeing the sites, but understanding the significance of what they are and what they represent. We get to go through the Capitol at night, and we get to see the spiritual heritage of our founding fathers, of who we are as a nation, where we came from. We bring in congressmen that'll tell you about current legislation, about our religious liberties and freedom, and what's going on in Washington, D.C. If you're a pastor, or if you want to recommend your pastor for this trip, you can go to our website, www.wallbuilders.com, and there's a link that's for scheduling. If you click on that link, there's a section for pastor's briefing. There's more information about the dates, when it's going, how it's going to happen. If you want to know more about our nation, our religious liberties, our freedom, our spiritual heritage, this is a trip you want to be a part of.
We're back here on Good News Friday at WallBuilders Live. And by the way, if you're enjoying this, which I enjoy it every week, everybody needs a little pick-me-up and to know that there's good things happening out there and that the system does work if we work it. If you want even more than what we're bringing at you today, go to wallbuilderslive.com today and check out the archive section there, and you can go back to some of those previous Friday programs. But back to our stacks. David Barton's got the next piece of good news.
This piece of good news, now, I don't know. Rick, you are sitting down for this? Are you okay? I don't want you falling, hitting your head, or having some accident
I'm bracing myself. I'm actually bracing myself. I'm ready.
Okay, this piece of good news comes from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that right. That does not. No matter how braced I am, that doesn't compute in my brain.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I shouldn't say. I'm not going to say on air what. No, I can't. Go ahead. Good News Friday.
I mean,
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
This has got to be a first. This has got to be a first. I don't think that I've ever used her for any Good News Fridays before. But this goes back to 1972. 1972, Congress passed what was called the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA. And that Equal Rights Amendment was basically pointed at genders. Now, the problem is, and that did not become a part of the Constitution. It was not part, but a lot of states put ERAs in their own state constitutions. As a result, the ERA has been used in ways that was never designed for gender back then, because gender is now defined to mean 91 different genders that we know legally are there. It's also been used to recognize sexual orientation, and it's also been used to say, in the case of Jack Phillips and others, is, well, we're in Colorado, we have a state equal rights amendment, so you Christians do not have equal rights because gay rights are greater than Christian rights. And so virtually everywhere we see these attacks on conscience in states, it's because those states have equal rights amendments. And those equal rights amendments are interpreted in a way that does not allow religious protection or rights of conscience. So they really violate the First Amendment of the federal Constitution. Now, having said that, what happened was when Congress passed the ERA back in 1972, it needed 38 states to ratify the amendment. And Congress, as part of the amendment, put a limit on it that says you have 7 years to ratify. If 38 states don't do it within 7 years, then the amendment's dead. At the end of 7 years, 35 states had done so. So Congress passed another law that says we're going to extend the deadline another 3 years. At the end of that 10 years, which was 1982, they did not have the 38 states. Now, since then, other states have ratified, and we passed the 38 mark. Recently Nevada has ratified, and recently Virginia has ratified, and so it's over 38 now. And so people are arguing that this should be made part of the Constitution, that Congress doesn't have the authority to limit how many years can be put on an amendment, and they can't do that. And by the way, in the meantime, 5 states have rescinded their approval of the ERA because they saw how it was used for things that were never intended, and that was between gender equality of males and females, not 91 identified genders. So
if 5 have rescinded, then those people that want to say it's part of the Constitution have to also make the argument that a state can't rescind.
That's the argument they're making. And so when Ruth Bader Ginsburg recently addressed this issue, she said, and because if this thing gets adjudicated, it will end up in front of the Supreme Court. The Attorney General, states' Attorney Generals have filed suit saying you've got to recognize our ratification even if it's late. You can't rescind the others. So this is being argued. If it ends up in front of the court, she's going to be a voice on it. And she said that she believes that 1982 deadline given by Congress stands, and that she will recognize that as a limitation that Congress had the right to impose on that amendment, which means that this gets to the court and she's the deciding vote. She's going to actually come down on the side of Congress had the power to do what Congress did, which is amazing. This is not where the liberal left progressive agenda wants to go. And so someone they would count on very explicitly to do this, she said, no, not going to be part of that. And I consider that to be really good news because that's recognizing original intent and going with the intent that was placed on that amendment when it was ratified by Congress. And when Congress said, here's the conditions we're putting on it, that's good stuff.
Good news from Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. I think we should just have a moment of silence here to appreciate this very unusual moment. Okay, we're not really going to do that, but I am quite shocked. We're going to take a quick break to give everybody a chance to digest this good news from Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the U.S. Supreme Court. When we come back, Tim Barton will have our next piece of good news. Stay with us, folks. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. As the upcoming elections approach, what qualifications should we look for in our leaders? One prominent founding father, Governor Morris, had a strong opinion on this question. Morris, a signer of the Constitution and its penman, openly declared, "There must be religion. When that ligament is torn, society is disjointed and its members perish. Vicious and unreligious rulers, placed in a situation where they can exercise authority for their own profits, will betray their trust. They take bribes. They sell laws. They sell honor and office. They sell their conscience. They sell their country. The most important of all lessons is the announcement of ruin to every state that rejects the precepts of religion. Therefore, in the upcoming elections, withhold your vote from any who would be hostile to basic religious principles."
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
We're back here on WallBuilders Live. Good News Friday today, and Tim Barton's got the next piece of good news. Tim, where are we headed?
All right, guys, this one is coming out of the military, and it's coming from Fort Leonard Wood. And actually, it's a bit broader than Fort Leonard Wood, but that's the example we have right now. And the article says revival hits Army base and thousands of soldiers receive Jesus. That title is actually more accurate than we realize on a lot of levels, which we'll get into. One thing the article highlights is that at Fort Leonard Wood, they have experienced over the last however many months that over 1,400 soldiers have accepted Jesus. Now, this article came out the very end of January, so we're looking back several months at this point. But what they highlight in this article is that this revival happening at Fort Leonard Wood is not just unique to Fort Leonard Wood, and it's been going on at Fort Leonard Wood since back in 2018, where a chaplain there, his name is Jose, he has been seeing more and more soldiers who are engaged, who are feeling God doing something in their life. And so he says, we've seen 1,459 soldiers come to Christ. Now, this is the time of the interview, so presumably more since then. God is doing great things at Fort Leonard Wood among the hundreds of soldiers who have come to know Christ personally. Well, go even further. There was retired Major General Doug Carver, who also North American Missions Board Executive Director of Chaplaincy. So he's over the chaplaincy for this big mission board. He says this revival at Fort Leonard Wood is not that unusual for what he's seeing. He said it's happening widely in the armed forces. Now, guys, before I even go further in this article, this is a really cool thing that we have talked for years about some of the hostility toward religion in the military, right? Where with Mikey Weinstein and the Freedom from Religion Foundation and all these groups who have attacked faith in the military. And we've actually had shows where we had some of our friends, whether it's our friends from First Liberty or from Alliance Defending Freedom or Liberty Council or Pacific Justice, right? I mean, go down the list. We've had all these different law groups who have had some of these cases defending faith in the military specifically, right? And certainly they defend far beyond that. But First Liberty, our friends in Dallas, Kelly Shackelford, has an entire division just targeting the military, trying to help defend religious liberty in the military. We have seen now many, many victories inside the military where religious liberty is now being allowed on greater levels, certainly than it has been in previous years. But this is something that retired Major General Doug Carver, so the guy who's over the mission board of the chaplaincy program, so he's helping get chaplains to these different forts. He says, our troops who are increasingly hungry for truth and relevancy in their lives are finding a faith that works through a personal relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. The current spiritual awakening at Fort Leonard Wood is indicative of a great move of God taking place within the armed services today. And guys, I know that many of our listeners, just like we have been praying for God to move in our nation, God to help our nation, revival in our nation. And we certainly are seeing some cultural shifts in our nation where there are positive things happening. But to even be able to point to the military, right? To see our warriors, the guys on the front line who God is doing something special in the military, it's just really good news to see a revival happening inside the armed forces.
Well, it's fantastic news for us. You know, we've had so many programs where we've talked about how in the armed forces, the federal government, mostly due to Obama's policies and decrees handed down, was infringing upon members of our military being able to live out their faith, and especially with chaplains, but many other stories as well. And President Trump has been adamant about changing that and even said so on the campaign trail in 2016. So it is fantastic to see good news coming out of our armed forces, and so much good news from across the nation and around the world shared here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks to David and Tim for gathering those good news stories, for sharing them with us each week. As a listener of WallBuilders Live, if you'd like more of that good news, you can visit our website today at wallbuilderslive.com. A tremendous amount of good news and other educational materials there at the website. By the way, if you want to look, if you travel much and you're wondering where you can listen to WallBuilders Live, in addition to listening online or in podcasts and using apps on your phone, you can listen on our terrestrial stations around the nation. There are over 300 stations carrying WallBuilders Live, and so we can be heard in virtually every nook and cranny of the nation, but very strongly across the Midwest on bot radio and other stations. So check that out. They're at wallbuilderslive.com. We encourage you to look at those that list of stations and encourage and thank those stations for carrying WallBuilders Live. And then also at the website WallBuilders Live, you can make a donation. So that makes it possible for us to be on those stations, but it also makes it possible for us to do our training of pastors and young people and legislators, all the different things we're doing to equip and inspire others across the country to be a part of the solution and restore America's constitutional republic. You can be a part of that by making a donation today at wallbuilderslive.com. And when I say make a donation, I mean you may be saying, look, Rick, I can't do $5,000 or $10,000. Hey, look, if you can make $5, $25, those are the donations that when you couple that with so many others across the nation doing exactly the same thing, it allows us to really expand and continue to do this great work. So thank you, all of you, regardless of the amount, for those donations that you're making. Please consider doing that today if you haven't ever done that before, or if you have, now's another good time to do it. wallbuilderslive.com. We appreciate everyone's support. Thanks so much for listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided forever.